Good evening. I'd like to call this Tuesday, June 4th, 2019 meeting of Middletown City Council to order. If you please stand and join me in moment of meditation and the pledge of allegiance to the flag. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Skank, would you call a roll, please?
Mr. Bohannon.
Here.
Mr. Moon.
Here.
Mr. Mulligan.
Here.
Mayor Mulligan.
Here.
Ms. Vittori.
Here.
All right. First item we have this evening is our city manager reports. Mr. Atkins.
Your Honor, given the workshop that we just had and everything else going on, I got to say most of what I wanted to say up there. I will let you know that we had a request for an executive session on to the end of the meeting. We had something come in late this morning that we need to bring to your attention. We would ask for an executive session for real estate. I believe
Okay.
that's been added to the new agenda
Okay.
for after the regular meeting. I have, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Got a few citizen comments cards. The first I have is Mr. Joe Whitman. Mr. Whitman.
Get right to business.
Yeah, good evening. If we get your name and address for the record, please.
Joe Whitman, 1504 North Braille Boulevard. I come tonight as a concerned citizen due to recent legislation passed by City Council in regard to property owner rights. We just had an ordinance passed regarding vacant or semi-vacant buildings, which increases and centralizes the city's power to punish or coerce property owners the city deems irresponsible or negligent. The ordinance was opposed by many citizens due to concerns over how the legislation could be abused and a perceived overreach by the city to address a problem that can be remedied by other means. Tonight, the city is again voting on legislation that will empower the city to punish or coerce property owners it deems irresponsible, negligent, or irrelevant. There are again concerns over the use and possible abuse of power the city is enacting. This ordinance will grant the city the ability to improve civil and criminal charges against citizens of Middletown without due process of the courts. The ordinance will allow the city to subjectively levy fines without standards in place to assure the fairness and equity of the process. In fact, the ordinance empowers city officials to levy fines, to sit as the hearing official, and to decide if the fines are fair and reasonable. All of these city officials will be under the control of the city manager, who is not an elected official. The concern I hear voiced the most is that there are no standards to determine compliance mentioned and no additional training for city officials mentioned in this ordinance. It is reasonable to expect that if city officials are going to receive more power to levy civil and criminal charges, the employees of the city will need to receive a higher degree of training and have standards to adhere to. There should be very clear guidelines set forth that determine when and how city employees move forward with their actions, especially if they will be entering a building or premises without owner approval. Several states have implemented what they call an inspection warrant to clearly identify what violations will be inspected. With this tool, inspectors are not allowed to go on fishing trips to try to find as many violations as they can. I have seen firsthand the vacancy ordinance used as a tool of intimidation. I doubt this legislation is necessary for the city. I believe it is too broadly and vaguely written. It has few checks on centralized power, and I fear it will be too easily abused. I believe Ordinance 2019-35 is an overreach. It is like applying a tourniquet where a Band-Aid is needed. The ordinance centralizes power and does not allow for proper and direct oversight of city staff by council. I urge council members to vote against adoption of this ordinance.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming down this evening. Next, I have Ms. Sue Whitman. Good evening. If we get your name and address for the record, please.
Sue Whitman, 1504 North Briel, where Joe lives. Mayor Mulligan, members of council, city staff, thank you for the opportunity to express my concerns over the direction our city seems to be taking. Under this proposed legislation, and I'm speaking of the same proposal that Joe is concerned about, one person, the city manager, has the sole ability to appoint and oversee a hearing administrator of all of the code violations listed in this ordinance, and there are many. And none of us should feel comfortable with that. Final notice of these civil offenses, which have a 10-day response window, are served via regular mail, and none of us should be comfortable with that. There are no hearings unless you request one, and then the hearing is before the city-appointed hearing administrator, not a judge, and none of us should be comfortable with that. Exhibit C allows for the party in violation of Code 1436.99 to be charged with a fourth-degree misdemeanor or up to 30 days in jail without appearing in court, and none of us should feel comfortable with that. And what should make us all very uncomfortable is that the city has failed to list what code number 1436.99 is in this proposed legislation. So I think that this should be tabled until these issues can be addressed and this 1436.99 can be clarified.
Okay. Thank you for your thoughts this evening. Next, I have Ms. Denise Brodsky.
Thank you.
Good evening. If we get your name and address for the record, please.
Sure, it's Denise Brodsky, 662 South Washington Boulevard, West Hamilton, Ohio. Mayor Mulligan and members of the council and city manager, as a founding member of an organization that owns a significant piece of real estate here in Middletown, thank you for the opportunity to express concerns and raise some questions regarding the Ordinance 2019-35, sections 1436.06 and 1436.99, which relate to the appearance or the lack of due process in both sections, and you can refer to section B and C. Other questions center around is this duplicative? Are there conflicts of interest? How does this impact public versus private space? Do you need a warrant to cite a public space? While I am not a lawyer and certainly do not pretend to be one, it seems that both sections may be in conflict with general law under the Ohio Constitution and federal protections under the 14th Amendment relating to the right to due process, along with the 4th and 5th Amendment, the 4th protecting the right to privacy and freedom from unreasonable intrusion by government, and the 5th Amendment relating to double jeopardy, which has several parts, but essentially protects individuals from being subject to the same offense more than once. 1436.06 seems to be in violation or in conflict with the Fifth Amendment in that it, quotes, does not preclude subsequent violations of a similar nature. When also combining this with the vacant building ordinance, it's easy to see that this could easily be a double jeopardy issue. Further, by increasing the penalty from a misdemeanor to a criminal offense may also be in conflict with Ohio's general law. Even though cities can operate under home rule, if the ordinance imposes penalties that are in conflict with general law, the city is operating out of the scope of the powers of their local self-government and not within their limits of enforcement of said regulation. And I'm citing that from the Legislative Service Commission's brief for members of the Ohio General Assembly in January 2010. If your goal is to build community relations and promote public morale, these ordinances seem egregious and only enforces distrust and the perception of government overreach and abuse of power. Lastly, I question why 1436.99 is omitted from Chapter 214 list of codified ordinances. If this is a mistake, the second reading of this legislation must be postponed. In summary, home rule does not preempt federal law. No state, and I'm quoting this, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within this jurisdiction the equal protections of the laws. So I ask that you table this item this evening so we can have further deliberation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your thoughts this evening. Next, I have Mr. Dan Tracy. If we get your name or address for the record, please.
My name's Dan Tracy. I live at 4921 Oaks Court, Middletown, Ohio. Thanks, council, staff, for letting us talk. Most of what I was going to say has already been said, but I do have a few extra things. We have 7 pages of violations in this ordinance. 7 pages, and there's about approximately 40 violations on each page. That's about 270, 280 violations. And they go from A to Z. And I think that we have no due process set up for these violations. If you want to raise fines, that's fine, but we don't need another ordinance. We've got ordinances, like I said 4 to 6 weeks, 8 weeks ago. We've got ordinances in place that will do what this ordinance will do. Maybe not to the satisfaction of this council or staff, but it will do that. If that has to be changed, let's change some of those. We don't need more ordinances. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And last card I have this evening is from Miss Rachel Lewitt. Good evening. If we get your name and address for the record, please.
Absolutely. Thank you. Rachel Lewitt, 2804 Central Avenue. Good evening, council, mayor, and city manager and staff. Thank you very much for the opportunity to provide my concerned comments regarding the same ordinance everyone's speaking about tonight. The chapter 214.01 states charging a person with a civil offense is an alternative to criminal prosecution. That is also criminal. All right, great. All right, but 214 continues to list a variety of sections that can be civil offenses subject to fines, and I'm going to list just a few of them. I thought more people would be here and more people might be interested who do watch this on YouTube. Spitting, dog barking, advertising, flyers and signs, business discount sales, yard and property maintenance. The list goes on and provides special exhibits for property maintenance penalties. This new chapter of the City Code outlines civil fines and penalties that not only increase the current standard, but provides the ability for an appointee of the city manager to charge a citizen with a 4th-degree misdemeanor and imprisonment. Chapter 14 outlines a new process of legislation, but it's vague. It doesn't have the specifics. Let's talk about it. If a city official cites someone with a notice, is the fee imposed immediately? Is it placed on the formal record? When would a case be opened in court? This is not clear. The ordinance implies that any city official or a hearings officer, they're essentially the judge and jury. Who is qualified and with what standards will they use to make these decisions? This is not clear. Why is section 1436.99 omitted from the table of code violations, but yet highlighted with an exhibit? This is not clear. Is it a mistake? If so, perhaps the first reading should be void. There are regulations on the books, as has been pointed out, to fine and penalize. However, it seems the city rules continue to change, and many times it's quietly and without public input. So let's talk about it. Is it fair and just, upon a second notice if you're served, to possibly enter a property and be sent to jail? This legislation gives tremendous power to the designated. When do we have these open discussions? When can we talk about it? We continue to come to you and ask that we want to participate and we want to discuss so we can have meaningful process and decisions. Healthy government does not slowly usurp our private property rights and potentially circumvent the nature of due process. Healthy government uses more carrots than hammers. Healthy government does not lean in to infringe upon our constitutional rights. If you wish to be a city that encourages growth, to help improve our image and the desire for people to work, live, play, and love being here, then let the good works that we're doing continue and continue to flourish, and others will join in. Be the vision, the inspiration, and the hope and collaboration for a brighter future. I love living and working in Middletown. I'm excited about our city and the opportunities that lie ahead. Please be the government that lifts up the people instead of the hand that pushes them down. I respectfully request that you do not move forward with the ordinance, and thank you so much for your time.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate your thoughts this evening. All right, that's all the comment cards I have this evening. That brings us to our consent agenda.
For your consideration this evening, we have the confirmation of the personnel appointment of Brett Vance to the position of firefighter EMT in the Department of Public Safety Division of Fire. To request approval to purchase a new Ford Transit sewer service van off of the ODAS contract for the Division of Sewer Maintenance in the total amount of $27,692.50 for Middletown Ford.
All right, thank you. Do we have a motion for the approval of the issues and actions as listed on the consent agenda?
Second?
Okay. Ms. Camp, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan?
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
We have one motion item this evening.
To enter into a contract with Jess Howard Electric Company of Blacklick, Ohio for the airport taxiway edge lighting improvements as agreed to by the Federal Aviation Administration.
All right, do we have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Atkins?
Yes, Your Honor. Middletown Regional Airport was notified in March by ODOT that our proposed taxi lighting rehabilitation project scored high enough to be funded. That's at a 95.5% split. ODOT's portion would be $396,230.75. City match at 5% would be $20,854.25. We do have this project in the airport capital budget, and it is ready for your action this evening.
Okay, any questions or comments for Mr. Atkins? Okay, Ms. Camp, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon?
Yes.
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Thank you. That brings us to council comments. Start this evening with Mr. Mulligan.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. First, thanks to the organizers and volunteers who put together the Memorial Day Parade last week. It was very well attended, well executed, and so much participation, and the weather cooperated. So a great way to honor our fallen veterans after the parade at Woodside Cemetery as well. Express my thanks to the groups that were involved with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bohannon?
Thank you, Mayor. Regarding this issue that we're talking about for item 7 in our agenda, I don't know if it's out of place or not, but I would like to ask the judge if he would be able to come to the podium and give us his viewpoint, because a lot of the folks were talking about taking things out of the legal part of jurisdictions and moving them into city judgments and things like that. Is there any issues that you have with doing that?
Sure. Our special guest, Judge Sharon.
James Sharon, 1 Donald. I've been asked, a couple of council members have approached me and had some discussion, and I think I like a lot of it. I think some of the property code maintenance, the gutters that are down and things of that nature, that's a good mechanism. I think some of the bigger issues, not bigger issues, some of the different issues, I think I would like to have some more input on them. I'd like to have some discussion on it. I think I met with Doug and Les last year, and we expressed our concern. It was kind of just a framework of an idea at that point. And then I saw it on the agenda at the first reading the week before, had a chance to get a glance at it, and then I talked to Steve and I talked to Susan the day before, so I hadn't really had much input into it. I'd like to have some discussion on it. I'm not here to, I wasn't here to talk.
I know. Yeah.
And I'm not here to railroad any agenda. I'm not trying to sideswipe anybody. I would like to have some more input into it. I think some of the concerns and some of those issues that have been raised tonight, they're new to me, and there's some legitimate. I know that it's been enacted in other cities, and I know that it's worked in some and hasn't worked in some, and I know there's been some case law that goes both directions on that. The issues that concern me the most, I've expressed a couple kind of arcane examples that, and I say arcane, what I've discovered in the year and a half on the bench is anything that you can imagine happening, it's either happened or it's going to happen. He can attest to that also, being the prosecutor. For example, so let's say you pull somebody over and you're a police officer and you pull somebody over and you can't decide whether it's a city code, or I'm sorry, administrative, civil, or criminal, and you go civil on it, and then you find something, and then you want to arrest them for that. I could see a good defense attorney climbing all over that and make an issue with that. A dog bite case, right now it's a misdemeanor. Let's say that a dog kills the neighbor's dog and the police officer goes civil on it because he has that choice. Let's say it's the first time that dog's ever done that. Right now, it's a misdemeanor. The next time that dog bites somebody, it elevates to a higher misdemeanor, higher fines, higher potential jail sentence. If it goes civilly, it doesn't have that ability, as far as I can tell. I've thought of a few examples like that. Some of the tax code violations. We haven't had a single tax code violation come in this year, so I don't know what's going on with them. It's not like the court's being overburdened or anything. I don't mind not dealing with the property nuisance issues, although I see some of the issues that these people are raising that are I'm not a landlord, so I don't face those types of issues, but I see it as being a valid issue. Right now, if somebody doesn't like the inspector's decision, then they can come to court. I guess I have somewhat of an issue with this all being executive branch. You legislate it, and the executive branch enforces it, and hears it, adjudicates it. If with these code violations, with all of these violations, I heard 270. I didn't think there were that many, but there's a lot of them in there. If somebody doesn't like that decision, they're going to have to pay $315 and go to Butler County Common Pleas Court and file a suit there, file an appeal there to have it addressed. So that's, to me, kind of extreme too. But the bigger issues to me, to the court, are the due process issues, and from a court's perspective, on some of these, and again, I don't disagree with the intent and a lot of the proposal. It's the breadth of it. I think it's overly broad. I think a lot of these issues belong in court. I was driving to work this morning, and I'm driving down Reinhardt's, and I pass over the overpass, and I'm looking at the garbage on the streets, and this issue comes up to me. I think, well, that might be a perfect kind of situation that the city, the administrative code would work. A civil, you slap that guy with a $50 fine or a $100 fine instead of dragging him into court. But then I thought, how is that any better than what you got right now? You can either go civilly or criminally on him right now. It's a code violation, or it's a criminal charge, littering or some other type of charge. If he comes into court, if it's a minor misdemeanor, I can fine him up to $150. If it's a fourth-degree misdemeanor, I can tell him he's going to go to jail for 30 days if he doesn't clean it up. Now, he's not going to go to jail that first time. That's no surprise. But that second or third time, day or two in jail might wake that guy up, and it might keep him from doing that the next time. So I didn't mean to talk like this, but I guess my overriding point is there's a lot of tentacles to this octopus, and I think it would merit more discussion, and I'd love to be involved in that discussion. If you pass it, you know what? I'll work with what you got. I'll work with what you guys do. But I think that it's a pretty huge piece of legislation you guys are chewing on here, and I wouldn't mind having some more discussion about it.
So ask this question. Based on the police officer situation, is it better that he has options when he approaches a vehicle, that he would have some options as to how to handle it? Or does it make it more difficult for him as an officer and take up more of his time?
Yes, both. It's both. and maybe the fact that it's both makes it overly complicated. Again, and I would like police input into this issue. I don't know the specific answer to that question, but you know, there's a formula right now, there's a procedure right now, there's a protocol that they're trained in, that they know exactly what to do and how to do it. They're darn good at it. So you're introducing this new element into it that gives them that additional pause for thought. So yeah, could it be beneficial that they could, you know, cite them and not have a criminal charge pending? Yeah. Could that be detrimental, maybe in a bigger scope, at a higher level? Yeah, I think so. So, you know, again, I'll work with what you guys do or don't do tonight, and if you table it, or if you vote no, or if you want further input, I'd love to sit down with you and take a look at it.
Thank you, Judge. Appreciate that.
Sorry for talking way more than 5 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
That's all.
Anything else, Mr. Bohannon? No, that's it. All right. We didn't swear our witness in, no, either, so. Anyway, Ms. Vittori?
No comments, thank you.
Vice Mayor Moon?
Thank you. I would echo Councilman Mulligan's comments about the parade. It was well run. It was nice that it wasn't 100 degrees like I think it was last year. It was just a great time. So thank you to everyone involved in the parade and the festivities at the cemetery. On item 7, I would say the judge summarized much of what I'm thinking. I do support many of the lower level type A, type B options for the civil penalty. I am concerned about moving some of the more serious items into the openness of a civil penalty versus a criminal penalty. So when it's time, I'd like to move that we table it and possibly bring back in a couple weeks the lower level items and then refine some of the more serious items. That's all I have.
All right, that's all you have? Okay, thank you. With that, I just reiterate those comments on the Memorial Day festivities, and would also like to thank the organizers of the bash. They're off to a start this year. I missed the first one, but I think they were off and running, and we got another one coming up this week. And looking forward to some great events in downtown. We were away this weekend, but to understand First Friday wasn't too bad. I think the weather was pretty decent, and certainly appreciate all the work that goes into that. We've got some exciting news with a ribbon cutting, I think, for BMW motorcycles, or and Cincinnati BMW, whatever it is. So here in Middletown, Greater Cincinnati, yeah, Greater Cincinnati, Southern Dayton. Excited to see that come together. And, that was utilizing underused city asset that came back to us, and was a creative solution. And glad to see that. That'll be, I think, scheduled the end of this month. So they're working on getting that set up with DMI and the chamber. So looking forward to that. And had a number of other ribbon cuttings that are always exciting to see, and good to participate in that. And with that, Ms. Cohen, we can move on to our legislation for this evening.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have a few items asked for an emergency this meeting. So it asks for a motion to waive charter requirements for 2 readings and 30 days to enactment regarding Ordinance O 2019-30, O 2019-31, O 2019-32, O 2019-33, O 2019-34, and Resolution R 2019-16.
I move that the charter provision requiring readings on 2 separate days be suspended and the ordinance or resolution be declared an emergency measure and read one time only.
Okay.
Second?
Okay. Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Mulligan,
Yes.
Ms. Vittori,
Yes,
Mr. Bohannon,
Yes?
Mr. Moon,
Yes?
Mr. Mulligan.
Yes.
Thank you. The first matter is Ordinance O 2019-30, an ordinance authorizing and improving a petition for special assessments for special energy improvement projects and plan for public improvements and declaring an emergency.
Okay, do we have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, any discussion or comments? We had a presentation on this last time for the community center and PACE funding. All right, Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Vittori,
yes,
Mr. Bohannon,
Yes?
Mr. Moon,
Yes?
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan.
Yes.
Next matter is Ordinance O 2019-31, an ordinance authorizing and approving a cooperative agreement providing for the financing of a special energy improvement project in the City of Middletown, authorizing and approving a special energy assessment agreement, authorizing and approving a construction agency agreement, authorizing and approving certain other related documents, and declaring an emergency.
Okay, do we have a motion to adopt?
Second?
Okay, any other discussion or comments? All tied to the PACE for the community center? Okay, Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Bohannon,
Yes?
Mr. Moon,
Yes?
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan,
Yes.
Ms. Vittori.
yes,
Number 3 is Resolution R 2019-16, a resolution approving the necessity of acquiring, constructing, and improving certain public improvements in the City of Middletown, Ohio, in cooperation with the Middletown Energy Special Improvement District and declaring an emergency.
Okay, do a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion or comments? Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Moon.
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan.
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan.
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon.
Yes?
Ms. Vettori.
Yes.
Number 4 is Ordinance O 2019-32, an ordinance determining to proceed with the acquisition, construction, and improvement of certain public improvements in the City of Middletown in cooperation with the Middletown Energy Special Improvement District and declaring an emergency.
Okay, do a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Mulligan.
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan.
Yes.
Ms. Vettori.
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon.
Yes?
Mr. Moon.
Yes.
Number 5 is Ordinance O 2019-33, an ordinance levying special assessments for the purposes of acquiring, constructing, and improving certain public improvements in the City of Middletown, Ohio, in cooperation with the Middletown Energy Special Improvement District and declaring an emergency.
Okay, do a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Mulligan.
Yes.
Ms. Vettori.
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon.
Yes?
Mr. Moon.
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan.
Yes.
Number 6 is Ordinance O 2019-34, an ordinance establishing a procedure for and authorizing a contract with Juice Technologies Incorporated, doing business as PlugSmart, for a PACE project to implement energy conservation measures at the Robert Sonny Hill Junior Community Center and declaring an emergency.
Okay, do a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Vettori.
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon.
Yes?
Mr. Moon.
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan.
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan.
Yes.
Number 7, Ordinance O 2019-35, an ordinance to enact Chapter 214, Code Compliance and Civil Offenses and Fines, and amend Sections 1436.06, Remedial Action, and 1436.99, Penalty of the Middletown Codified Ordinances, set for a second reading.
Okay, do a motion to adopt?
Your Honor, I'd move to table.
Okay, we have a motion to table this item. Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, any discussion or comment on tabling it?
Well, I'd rather have some input from staff first before we vote on tabling it.
Okay, Mr. Atkins, you have anything to add at this point, or?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
First off, this does not create any new offenses. These are the exact same things you've had on the books for sometimes decades. Those standards are in place. What is a violation? Who can enforce a violation? None of that has changed at all. Nothing has changed. We do not have any additional ability to enter people's structures. We've always had the ability to go get an administrative search warrant from the judge if we believe we need to get into a building, and we can't. None of that changes. We've always had the ability to cite people criminally. That doesn't change. A police officer has always had the discretion to warn, to do nothing, to summons them, or to arrest them if it's an arrestable offense. None of that changes, but now he has another option. He can do a civil penalty, almost like a parking ticket, if he so chooses to do so. This is not something that's blazing trails here, folks. This is new to Middletown. This is not new. Cincinnati's had this in place for years. Other communities have had it in place for years. It's been challenged. It's been upheld. It has due process. It works. It's just that simple. The training is already scheduled for later this month before it goes into implementation, because it'll be 30 days after this that it would take effect. Training's already scheduled. Susan's doing the training. 1436.99 is not listed in that long list because that's the penalty section. It's not calling out a specific portion of a violation. This is the penalty section. It's exactly where it's supposed to be. You know, I understand the judge's comments, but it takes time to get things to court. It's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of overtime for staff to go if it's not during the day. If it's a police officer and they're off that day, we're paying overtime for them to come in for a pretrial. We have a hearing officer that we will appoint. They have the ability to offend. Again, this is stuff that has been done in other communities for a long time, and it has worked pretty well to clean up, again, another portion of those code enforcement. None of these things that we have on the books is a silver bullet. None of them is like, this one's going to be the one that solves everything for us. It doesn't work that way. But there are a certain number of people in a certain number of instances where this will be the most effective tool. The civil will give us an edge in that we don't have before, and it will solve problems that currently are done. Will it solve them all, the rest of them? No, it won't. We'll still have people we have trouble getting service on. We'll still have issues that we've got that this will not solve. But we were talking a little bit, and somebody earlier this afternoon, I don't remember if it was Mayor or who, but gave the example of the dog fighting in an email. Would you use dog fighting for a civil offense? Well, I can tell you as a prosecutor, maybe. Let me explain it to you. You go out and you're a police officer and you get to a place and somebody's taken their pit bull and they've purposely gone and killed somebody's poodle. Probably not going to give a civil offense. Do they have the ability under this? Yeah, but you probably wouldn't. Again, that's why we go through the training. That's why the police has their discretion. And the answer is you'd probably wait for the dog catcher. You'd seize the dog. You'd arrest him. He'd appear before the judge. He'd go on. Now, what if it's two idiots who are standing next to each other going, my pit bull's meaner than your pit bull? Nuh-uh. And then the two dogs, well, let's just have them fight. And they get together for about 8 seconds. A police officer walks up and says, cut that crap out. They pull the dogs apart. No dogs have been done. They've been fighting. And he goes, now, I have a choice here, gentlemen. I can arrest both of you. I can seize both your dogs and have the animal control officer come out. Or I can give you a civil penalty if you want to cut this crap out and go home tonight. What would it be, gentlemen? And they go, we'll take the penalty and we'll go home. That's a situation you might want to do it. And you say, well, that wouldn't happen. Ask the police department. This is the crap that they deal with every day. This is the crap that as prosecutors we deal with the next morning when they come in and they've either been summoned or they've been arrested. Now, if you want to make that muddier, let's do it this. We're talking to those two people who just had their silly pit bulls doing it, and 3 overdoses and 2 car wrecks come in. And now he goes, boys, go home, stop this crap. Here's your summons. If I see you, I'm going to tell the dispatch, if we see you out the rest of the night, we will arrest you next time for another offense. Go home and cut this crap out. Free him up, get him out, get him to the overdoses, get him to the car accidents, get him helping in serious things that are going on in the city. So the answer is, yeah, this stuff happens all the time. We see it every day. When we were prosecutor, when I was prosecutor, we sometimes have 80 or 90 cases a day. And most of it was dumb and desperate. Very seldom do we see evil in this city. We do from time to time. But I can tell you, that's an assault. If I break her nose, that's also an assault. You don't treat them the same. And it's the same thing with dogs. It's the same thing with a lot of these other offenses that are on this list. I've had domestic violence cases where he hit him with a pillow. I've had domestic violence cases where they threw him through a plate glass window, threw him through a porch, threw him into a rose bush, and it was this close for being felonious assault. Both of those are assault. You don't handle them the same. When we were in front of Judge Wall, I had done 300, 400 assault trials. I could tell you by the offense whether he was going to be guilty or not, and I could tell you exactly what the sentence was going to be because after 300 of them, I had seen the entire range from that to almost felonious assault. These officers are well trained. Will there be mistakes? They make mistakes now. They'll tell you that. But this is not blazing trails, folks. This is not crazy new stuff. This is stuff that's been done in other communities for years. It's been effective, again, in another piece of code enforcement and criminal stuff that is more dumb and nuisance than anything else, and it gives everybody another tool to do it. There are appeals, there are ways to get it done, and it's, again, this is not blazing new trails. Again, if we don't want to do it for Middletown, that's what you guys are here to decide. But this is not something that's just like Atkins invented this new thing. This has been used all over the state for a long time, folks.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Atkins on our motion table?
Well, just based, the anticipated benefit, no, and I appreciate, I think that should allay many fears, and that certainly clarifies some things in my mind. But as far as the success stories in other communities, is the intent to maybe relieve the municipal court of some of the burden, or is that the anticipated benefit as well as getting some more compliance faster?
It'll be that, and again, there'll be people, again, the judge was talking about trash. You know, we have the ability now, we can cite you into court, or we can abate it, or we can, it says in almost all of our nuisance ordinances especially, every day is a continuing offense, which means if you don't pick up the trash after your statutory time, I've cited you, I've given you a notice of violation, you've got all this trash, you have so many days to get it done. If you don't do it, I can pay general fund money, we can go out and abate it, or in this case, I can cite you, or I could give you a civil penalty. And I could say, every day you don't pick up your trash, I'm gonna give you another penalty until you decide you wanna get the trash picked up. But again, it's give them a civil penalty and have them pay that, or pay $250 to have out of the general fund to go get it abated. We wanna do more abatement, we can do that. But we already spend $250,000 abating nuisances a year and $25,000 boarding up properties. If you want to do more, we can. But again, this is another option in certain situations that would say, rather than spend $250 of the general fund money, let's give the guy a ticket and see if that takes care of it. And so some of it depends on the person, some of it depends on the nuisance, and some of it depends on what our other options are. You know, if it's a small trash, we might run out and do it. If it's a set out, you want to spend, $500 set out? Maybe not. Maybe we put that burden back on the landlord.
Anything else on our motion to table? Okay, Ms. Skank, would you call the roll for the motion to table ordinance 2019-35?
Mr. Bohannon?
Yes.
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan?
No.
Mayor Mulligan?
No.
Ms. Vettori?
No.
Okay, that motion fails, so we'll vote on the ordinance. So we had the reading. Do we have a motion to adopt ordinance 2019-35?
So moved?
Second.
Okay, any other discussion or comments on the ordinance?
No, I appreciate all the public comment that we received on this, and just from my standpoint, if we can give our staff proven methods for flexibility to enforce violations, various violations, over 200, I think we should do that. And again, just another tool in the toolbox. It's not going to be a perfect solution, and like any of our ordinances, it can be amended and changed as we receive more input. But if we can get this up and running, we certainly will evaluate it at the end of the year and see if it's been effective or not. And hopefully the results will be that it is. So, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I too would agree with Mr. Mulligan. I have my concerns over this as well. We've been debating this for some time as we've looked through it, so it hasn't gone without due consideration on our part. Gotten a lot of input, both positive and negative. But more generally, it's, a lot of these things have been existing for a number of years in the city, and we need to do things a little differently. And this, as was said, is another tool in the toolbox. It's probably not the only tool that we'll ever use, and I don't think it should be. But with that, I do think we need to keep an open mind and with all things new and creative, be able to adapt and change as need be. But I believe it's certainly worth a try to get this going and see if we can make a difference and improve our community. So, with that, Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Moon?
No.
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan?
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon?
No?
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
All right, that motion carries 3-2. So we can move on with the rest of the agenda.
Number 8 is ordinance O 2019-36, an ordinance to levy special assessments for the repair of sidewalks, curbs, and gutters in the city of Middletown during the year 2018 against the lots and lands benefited by said improvement. That for a second reading this evening.
Okay, do we have a motion to adopt?
Second?
Okay, we had our presentation on this before. This is our annual kind of catch-up maintenance for the sidewalk, curb, and gutter. Any question or comments? Okay, Ms. Skank, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Mulligan?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon?
Yes.
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Number 9 is Ordinance O 2019-37, an ordinance establishing a procedure for and authorizing an amendment to a contract with National Water Services LLC for an additional well screen and declaring an emergency. No action requested until June 18.
Okay, Mr. Atkins?
Yes, Your Honor, back in October of last year, the city took bids for well drilling services. The bid was awarded to National Water Services LLC. Now that the drilling is complete, we need to add an additional 20 feet of well screen to provide good flow rates for years to come on that new well. We have funds appropriated in the 2019 Wellfield program for this purchase. We are asking for a second reading emergency on June 18th. We have 2 wells that are no longer in service, and we would like to get this new well up and running as quickly as possible.
Okay. Any questions or comments on this one?
Next matter is Ordinance O 2019-38, an ordinance establishing a procedure for and authorizing a contract with BrainWave Connections Inc for Phase 2 of the Oakland Renovation and Revitalization Incentive District and declaring an emergency. Also, no action requested until the 18th.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes, Your Honor, the amount of this is $108,006.56. It'll be coming out of the Economic Development Department. We had a workshop on this a couple weeks ago where we laid out what Phase 1 had been completed and Phase 2, the groundwork to get the program up and running would entail, and we will be asking for your approval at the next meeting.
Any initial questions or comments? Okay, thank you. And that's it for ordinance. So the last item we have on our agenda is an executive session, so I need a motion in the authority of Revised Code 121.22 G2 to consider the purchase of property for public purposes, for the sale of property at competitive bidding, if premature disclosure of information would give an unfair, competitive, or bargaining advantage.
So moved?
Okay, Ms. Kank, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Mulligan,
Yes.
Ms. Vettori,
Yes.
Mr. Bohannon,
Yes?
Mr. Moon,
Yes?
Mr. Mulligan.
Yes.
All right, following our executive session, we'll be in recess until June 18th, 2019 in these chambers. Thank you. Have a good evening.